I think it's taken over. Yeah,
Really?
I think I'd like to say that it's about the experience and all this kind of stuff, but I think I'll be lying if I said that.
Okay.
I
So you're a filmmaker who happens to do adventure stuff.
I think so.
So you
but I
could,
think
you could well change from adventure to other filming things, possibly.
yeah, I think it pushes me to go out and do this stuff, and I enjoy that aspect of it. I think I wouldn't find the same motivation. Yeah, let's go here if I was just doing this stuff purely for the adventure side of things, which is interesting.
That is interesting, because my priority has always been adventure plus storytelling, and I've dilly-dallied between writing about them, podcasting about them, films about them, whereas for you it's this bit of a twist, little twist the other way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's elements of both, but you know, I wouldn't necessarily be planning to go down the Thames if I wasn't planning to make a film about it.
Right. So does the filming make your personal adventure experience better or worse?
Oh, it makes the personal adventure worse.
Right.
Definitely.
Okay.
But it allows me to do this stuff without the filming. I wouldn't be able to spend the time to do this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of necessary evil which I've just kind of accepted, I think.
So I'd say that's the obvious answer. It makes your adventure worse, and I can see that. But I've also found that the flip argument is at times when I've been filming adventures, it's really forced me to concentrate on being in the moment and looking around and thinking, how am I going to share this thing?
Yep.
Whereas if I'm not filming, I might just put in some music and wish I was back at home on the sofa and just daydream through the day. So I found that filming's helped me be present and therefore appreciate adventures more.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, especially if I was out on a cycle tour recently in Korea.
Yeah.
And I think there is a temptation, just to kind of shut yourself away a bit more. But because I was like, well, I'm making some films about this, I made the effort to go into places or speak to people that maybe I wouldn't have done if I wasn't.
So let me ask you then about filming cycling around the world, because I cycled around the world back in the ancient dark days when it never even crossed my mind. And now I see on YouTube these beautiful films of beautiful around the world stuff. And a little bit of me thinks, oh, I wish I'd done that. But most of me thinks, oh, I'm so glad I didn't have the filming pressure when I cycled around the world. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think for my personal trip, I left with the intention of sort of making some videos, but it wasn't the primary reason for doing it.
Okay.
I did just leave just to...
So that was adventure first?
Yeah, I wanted to travel, but I also enjoyed the kind of filming, sharing side of things, and I thought, okay, well, maybe this can turn into something potentially, but I never pushed it that hard in the first sort of year or so. And it was only after, I think I crossed like Kazakhstan, and I realised that, okay, I had some footage here that maybe I could turn into something that was more of a sort of episodic kind of series.
Right,
and that's when I started, and I had a bit of time. I had like 3 weeks while I was waiting around for like a new wheel to be sent out because my wheel destroyed itself in the middle of Kazakhstan and all this kind of stuff. And I think I was waiting for my passport as well, I think, because I'd sent it off to get a Chinese visa. But that's beside the point. But I had some downtime.
I also spent a lot of weeks in Kazakhstan waiting for stuff.
Gosh.
Okay, well, let me ask what I was probably going to start with, which is about going around the world. We've both gone around the world by bike, you by unicycle. Try and make the case to me of why going around the world on a unicycle is better than a proper bicycle. Note the word proper.
I think they're more similar than maybe people think. Certainly if you're looking for efficiency and I don't know, lack of saddle sores, I think take the bicycle.
Right. You can't freewheel a unicycle.
No, there's nothing practical about the unicycle.
Okay.
But
so you're not making a good case here?
No. Up until that point, I'd never, like when I left, I'd actually done more unicycling that had two-wheeled riding.
Okay.
So for me, it was kind of the obvious choice in a way to sort of challenge myself in that way. That was what interested me, and I knew it was possible, so I thought, well, why not? Or at least possible to do 40, 50 miles a day. I didn't know if the world trip was possible, but I knew at least I could get to France, and then I could get across Europe maybe, and then would see from there.
And I guess now with hindsight, you know that if you can cycle 50 miles, you can cycle around the world.
Yeah, easy. If you can cycle 20 miles, you can cycle around the world.
Yeah, I find that an incredible revelation about maybe it's the unmasking of big adventures, is that actually it's just going for a day ride
Yeah.
and repeat.
Yeah, yeah. People always ask me about training. And they say, well, how much training did you do? Like next to nothing for any of my trips. It's
Yes.
like you just, especially with a trip that is going to be that long, you just build that
Yeah,
fitness.
why
don't
do
you?
any extra?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But no, I mean the case for the unicycle, just to try and finish that thought.
Yeah.
It was just an incredible way to meet people.
Okay, like a conversation starter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it is the same on two wheels, and I've done a bit of two-wheel riding, and it is similar. But I think if you see some random guy come over the top of a hill on a unicycle, I think you're more likely to sort of stop him and ask what he's up to.
Yeah, even more than, because I would argue that's a great reason for a bicycle, but that's even more. We both have a mutual friend, super cycling man, who's cycled tens of thousands of miles dressed as a superhero, and that's the sort of overlap of the two, isn't it? You get the conversational aspect, but without the ridiculousness of the unicycle.
Yeah, and the pants outside of your cycle shorts.
So if you were going to go cycle around the world again, would you do it on one wheel or two, or an electric bike, or?
I think I'd probably do it on two.
Would you?
I'd go for a lighter weight kind of bikey packy type setup.
Okay.
That would allow me to access places which weren't really unicyclable when I was there, because that was the one downside. Like there'd be like routes I'd be looking at, I'd be like, well, maybe I could go down there. Looks quite exciting, but with one wheel, the amount of sort of distance you can cover, and certain roads, if they're too rough, you just can't ride. So it's just like, well, I'm walking this.
Okay.
It's 100 miles. How much food do I need to
one
carry?
wheel.
How much water do I need to carry?
It's basically a wheelbarrow then.
Yeah. Whereas a bike would just give you those options
Okay.
to be able to access those more remote places, and I think that's where my head would be at if I was to do it again.
Right.
But I can't honestly say that I'm going to be going out on another 3-year trip.
Okay, so you've done a 3-year round the world massive adventure. How did you find the process of rehabilitating to society, coming home? Had it scratched all your itches and solved all your demons, or did you find coming home hard?
Yeah, I found it quite difficult, I think. I mean, I was only back for about a year in the UK, and then I headed back out to Kyrgyzstan. So I lived there for a year or so.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
year and a half or so.
Okay.
It was actually during the pandemic time, so it was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Lockdown was interesting in Bishkek.
Yeah.
And then I did a bit of tandem riding.
Okay.
And I've only now been back in the UK for 2 and a bit years or something.
Right.
So I still feel like I'm kind of coming down from those kind of being out there, sort of expat kind of, I don't know what you call it. But I think now I'm definitely committed to being in the UK and looking to just do smaller, kind of shorter trips.
Okay.
And making the most of opportunities that come my way.
And do you feel that doing shorter UK-based trips, but presumably having a sort of normal life around it, is an ideal compromise? And do you feel that these shorter UK trips are an adequate substitute for the big stuff?
I think there's a part of me that would like to go on some big stuff, but I think in order to build relationships and all this kind of stuff, like my grandfather's 93, there's definitely more draws to me now to wanting to be closer.
Okay.
So I think that takes over my want for kind of big adventure. But I find that there's plenty of stuff that can be done here. It's just a matter of looking for it.
Okay. Some might say that that doing small little stuff, mucking around on UK rivers and little camping trips, is just a charade of adventuring and is not the real thing. And if you want to properly be an adventurer, you have to be doing epic stuff.
How many emails like that do you get?
What would be your? Well, I mean, is there a point to that? And what do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think if for me, I like to challenge myself to do things which I don't know if they're possible.
Right.
So I think as long as you're doing that, it doesn't matter in what context that you're doing it. Like, okay, I attempted to ride a unicycle around the world. I had no idea if that was possible.
Yeah.
But equally, like last year, I tried to go down my local river from source to sea, trying to stick in the river's course, like as faithfully as I possibly could. And that was a major challenge. Like day 3 of that, I was I don't know if I was sick from drinking some of the water, or I did purify it, but who knows? And that was a tough trip because I set off with like a 27-kilo backpack, and yeah, that really took it out of me. And I hadn't really done any kind of kayaking before, and it's quite daunting when you're getting to the mouth of a big river. Like, the Parrot's not massive,
out near the sea,
but the end is probably a kilometre across, and it's daunting if you've never kayaked down something like that before. Especially there's parts where you're going to cross the meanders, and you're out in the middle of it, and you're like, well, I don't know if I've got the experience to deal with this if something goes wrong, especially on an inflexible boat. So I think as long as you're challenging yourself to do stuff that's sort of on the edge of your capabilities, or maybe slightly more. Yeah. It doesn't matter what you're doing if you're doing something in a foreign country or here in England. Okay, so on that note of these UK adventures, we're walking along the Thames path now. Why have you brought me here today for this? So I enjoyed my local river, the River Parrot, so much. That was a 4-day trip from source to sea, and I'm now looking to do the Thames on a similar trip. So this is, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 miles down from the source here. Nice pub there you'll be able to stop at? Yeah, so we're just sort of scouting it out. I mean, I suspect this bit is probably the most pleasant bit of the trip. It's the start and the end of these trips which I think are the most challenging, because the start, you've got to try and get yourself through kind of foliage and whatever else is in the source, and then obviously at the end of this one is, you know, a lot of river traffic and, you know, central London that you've got to try and navigate, which I've got no idea how that's going to go. And is your approach to a trip like this to just think, I've got no idea what I'm doing, that sounds exciting, let's go, or do you like to plan and prepare? I like to err on the side of just head out and see what happens again this way. Okay. With this one, there's certain risks which I do need to plan for a little bit. Right. And there's certain licenses that I also need to, that I need to get, but by and large, in a couple of weeks I'm just going to set off and we're going to see how it goes. Okay. And the beauty of this one is that the major risks come at the end, so I'm hoping that, you know, after 10 days or so paddling down stuff like this, I would have built up enough experience to be able to deal with sort of the issues that central London might give me. So that's a really interesting approach, that you sort of have this idea, you don't know if you can do it, it's sort of, I guess, therefore nerve-wracking and uncertain, and you just do the bit of preparation to make sure it's legal and you're not going to die, etc. But then you trust yourself to just wing it and figure it out. Yeah. I get a lot of emails from people who really want to do adventures but just can't work out how to get started on those things. What's your advice for people who really like the idea of adventure but just get a bit bogged down rather than beginning? I think it's very easy to spend time like collecting kit and buying kit, reading blogs, and while that stuff is fun, and I do feel like that's kind of part of the adventure, like ultimately you have to go out and do something. And I think a lot of people get stuck behind their computers just feeling like there's too many barriers. Whereas I think, the kind of message that you're sending out is really important, because, you know, you don't have to, I mean, this isn't a comparatively big trip, but for some people a 2-week down the Thames wouldn't be possible. They don't have the time for that. So the kind of stuff after work or at weekends, I think it's a very important message to just get people out, even if it is just sort of sleeping on a hill. Do you think that have you got any plans for any kind of longer multi-day trips? I don't know, so I've just been driving around the M25 this morning to get to you, which is a classic way of making you want to just jump on a bicycle and disappear to Kazakhstan. So I do have times, literally this morning, of just thinking, oh man, I really want to go on a massive journey, but I feel I've scratched quite a lot of the itches in it. So certainly the reasons of doing adventures of wanting to prove myself to myself and prove myself to the world, I feel I've got beyond those sort of things. So my adventuring feels now that it's moving towards trying to have adventure plus purpose, that adventure for its own sake is brilliant and I'd encourage it to anyone, but there are a lot of big issues in the world, in the wild world, that need solving more than breaking some Guinness record for biking. So yeah, no, I understand. How do you feel about this sort of overlap between adventuring, which is great for yourself, plus some sort of, well, do you feel any sort of responsibility to the wilder environment and world? Yeah, no, I think I'm starting to move into that kind of trail of thoughts. I think you start to realise that I don't know, maybe selfish is a bit of a strong word, but going out and doing this stuff is perhaps a little bit selfish, and maybe it is good to start thinking about the places where you are going. Like with the Thames trip, I was in touch with the Rivers Trust yesterday. I had a call with them.
Okay.
And I think I will do some like fundraising for them on this trip.
Right.
Just to try and do some good at sort of cleaning up the rivers in the UK. How much I can raise, I don't know, but it's an idea.
So from your corner of the adventuring and YouTubing world, what do you see as the sort of big issues facing the adventuring world's in a good position to take some action on?
I think just showcasing issues, like, I mean, there's a lot of sewage that is being dumped into our rivers currently, and I feel like, okay, it's relatively high up on the news agenda, but it could be pushed further, and more can be done to kind of, you know, make these waterways a better place to just be and swim and all of that jazz.
Yes.
So I think it's anything like that. I mean, what do you see?
Well, I seem to be going through a phase of just seeing disaster and catastrophe wherever I look. I've just spent a year exploring the local Ordnance Survey map that I live on and writing about that and realising the variety of environmental, societal issues that are all tied up in that. And I'm really struggling at the moment to choose where to go. I mean, I suppose there's an argument that you can scatter yourself really thin and try and raise a bit of awareness on lots of things, or you can go like the Save Windermere campaign, just banging one drum. But I'm currently a bit unsure which of those approaches is best. You've got a great presence with your YouTube channel. Well, I've got a few questions about your YouTube channel. One, as somebody who makes YouTube videos myself, of similar sort of adventures, but which nobody ever watches, what are you doing so well to have such a fantastic success on YouTube? Beyond just being dashingly good looking and adventurous.
Yeah, of course.
Is that the key?
Well, I don't. It varies how well my stuff does,
Okay.
and you have to.
But it all does, I would say, 10 to 100 times better than me.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah. I think it's because I'm playing the game.
Okay, and what is the game?
It's the game of YouTube and working out the best way to. It's all about packaging. It's all about marketing, which is maybe not the best conversation for this, but it's interesting. Yeah. But it's thumbnails and titles,
okay.
And realistically, how you break it down in the first sort of 30 seconds to a minute of the video. Like, people need to know what they've clicked onto. And then after that, you can break out and you can talk about more kind of serious topics. But if I was to start my Thames River series and just say the rivers in the UK are full of shit, well, actually that might do all right, because that's quite hard hitting. But if I was, if I wasn't, no, it's an interesting question. You need to package it in a way that people that don't know you and that people that are just coming across you can instantly understand. And I think that's what's important, and it needs to be very accessible. It can't be so specific that it puts people off. But there's also an argument to be said that that's sort of slightly disingenuous, and actually just putting the films out that you want to make and just titling them whatever you want is a pure way of doing the filmmaking, whereas I'm specifically making stuff for YouTube.
Right. Yeah. And when adventurers get in touch with you and they have this sort of two-pronged question of, I want to do an adventure, please help me with that, and I want to be a YouTube hit sensation, I imagine you get these sorts of messages a lot. What's your advice for someone who's looking to start their first adventuring and wondering about filming it as well?
I think there needs, first of all, you need to really enjoy and be really excited about what you're doing. Because if you're not, then everything else goes out the window. Because people can tell. Like, people are very.
Morning.
Hi there. People know if something isn't genuine or not, and if you're just going for views or whatever else. You need to be genuinely excited about what it is you've chosen to do. And then I had another point. What was the question?
The question was about when first time people get in
Sure.
touch with you about
Yeah,
planning an adventure,
Yeah.
but also wondering about starting a YouTube life. What sort of things do you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if aiming to have the YouTube life is maybe what you should be aiming for necessarily. I don't think that should be the drive. I think you need to be genuinely wanting to be outside and doing what you're doing, because it's a very time-consuming thing, as I'm sure you know. Not just the filming, but you're getting back and editing for hours a day, which is for me a bigger percentage of the actual filmmaking than going out on these trips.
Yeah, I often point that out to people, that the actual adventure part of both of our lives is very much the shiny tip of the iceberg. And if you're not willing to, or keen for all the other stuff, then you'd be much better off going to be a investment banker and taking a month off a year, or becoming a school teacher and doing something in your summer holidays.
Yeah.
So do you enjoy all the non-tip of the iceberg part of life?
Not as much as the going out and filming.
Okay.
I do find the editing can be quite tedious sometimes.
Okay.
But I realise that is just part of the trade-off in order to be able to do this stuff.
Well, you could get someone else to do all the editing.
I've tried, and it's difficult when you're shooting kind of documentary style stuff when you personally don't really know what the story's going to become.
Yeah, and that's the nightmare, isn't it? You've got no idea what the storyline is.
Yeah, if I went out and I was like, here's the beat, here's the conflict, this is what I'm going to do. First of all, it wouldn't be genuine, it would all be scripted and it would be boring. The edit would be easier because you would have already planned out what you were doing.
Yes.
But I think the beauty of you know, what I do and what we do, I guess, is you just go out and maybe you have an idea of the kind of challenges that you're going to face, but in reality, you don't know who you're going to meet and what you're going to come across. So you film much more than you need to.
Yeah,
and then
much more.
And then the storytelling just comes from when you're sitting behind the computer working out what to show and what to highlight. And that's the bit that takes time. And I think that's the bit which someone else wouldn't be able to do as effectively as me, because they're not in my head and they don't know why I shot that. Or sometimes you haven't filmed things, but it's important to the story, so you need to try and tell that in a way that doesn't use footage.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
So I think something like that would be very difficult for someone to take over.
Yes, definitely. So my final question for you then, Ed, is what does the next 1 year, 5 years and 10-year vision look like in the adventurous life of Ed Pratt?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I could answer the 1 year. At the moment, I'm just prepping to head out on the Thames, so I should be on the water in 2 weeks, and then that will be a 2-week trip maybe. I don't want it to take more than 2 weeks,
right.
but it takes as long as it takes really, because I'm starting at the top and I'm not going to finish until I get down to the sea. So who knows how long that one will take, and then I'll get home from that, and then the edit starts. So that will be the majority of the next year, I suspect.
Wow. And then
I need to think up some more ideas.
Okay. Adventure, film, repeat for as long as it feels exciting and meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much.
Woohoo!